A little while ago, I asked you, who are the most underrated metal bands? The ones that for years have been cranking out consistently great albums and despite seeming like the full package have never gotten the same respect as their peers. And today we're going to talk about 10 of those bands. Let's kick off the list with possibly the most requested band from your comments, and that's Sybreed. This is a Swiss industrial metal band founded all the way back in 2003, and despite being big into everything from Fear Factory to Skinny Puppy around that time, Sybreed was never a band that really entered my awareness. And yet, since then, anytime I talk about industrial metal, I see y'all seemingly begging me to talk about them. Like many of the bands on this list, they seem to have garnered a loyal fan base, but just never hit it big, though the song Doomsday Party did end up as DLC for Rock Band. Unfortunately, they disbanded in 2013, but all 4 of their albums are pretty consistently fan-rated on Metal Storm, with Antares seeming to be the most popular overall. Next up, we have Within the Ruins. We are revolution! We are gods! Within the Ruins is a deathcore band with a highly technical twist that I've been enjoying since about 2013. In fact, I'd go so far to say that this band has arguably the most impressive guitar work in the genre thanks to the highly talented Joe Kochi, who has even been a guest on the channel. They've dropped 6 albums since Creature in 2009, with the comic book themed Phenomena being my personal favorite. And despite sporting both incredible riffs and highly infectious crowd-pleaser vocals, they've never reached the same heights as the likes of Beneath the Massacre, Infant Annihilator, or Whitechapel. Unfortunate because I still consider them to be among the top 10 of the entire genre. Let's take a turn into black metal territory now with Taake. This is another one that really puzzles me, as I hadn't even heard of this band until maybe 2014, but Hoest and the gang have been at it since 1993. For reference, that's basically right in the heart of the second wave formation of the genre in Norway, 1 year before the release of De Mysteriis Dom Satanis.
No way!
Now, to be fair, the first album didn't drop until 1999, but I'd argue that the quality of the music and the intensity of their stage performance would at least warrant their name being mentioned alongside the likes of Watain. And yet they continue to linger in relative obscurity, with "Who?" still being the most common response when I bring them up in conversation. Sure, they've had their share of controversies, but in black metal, who hasn't at this point? If any of that gets you interested, I'd recommend either Nadestid Serporten Vid or Norig's Vapen to get started. Then we have Rolo Tomassi. Nowadays, it seems like you can't finish out a week without some hot new single from a killer metal band with a female vocalist, but back in the 2000s, that was much more of a rare thing. As such, Rolo Tomassi feel very much ahead of their time, with only a few peers in the likes of Walls of Jericho and I Wrestled a Bear Once. And somehow they ended up more obscure than either, despite dropping 6 great albums, including the fantastic Where Myth Becomes Memory in 2022. I feel like if this band got started today, or at least had the same level of marketing as Ginger or Spiritbox especially, they'd be a massive hit with their union of hard-hitting and sometimes mathy metalcore with dreamlike shoegazy atmosphere. But hey, there's no time like the present to discover a great band that's been flying under the radar, so do your part to spread the word. Switching things up again, we have In Mourning. This is a Swedish melodic death metal band formed around 2000, and despite very much carrying on the same spirit of other Swedish melodeath bands like Dark Tranquillity in particular, they're far from a household name. All 6, again, of their albums are brimming with emotion and atmosphere, at times also comparable to Insomnium and even Opeth, not to mention plenty of great riffs along the way as well. And each one of them also offers something a little different from the last in terms of style and approach. My personal favorite is Afterglow, but after perusing the fan ratings again, that seems to be a less popular choice, with most clamoring for the debut Shrouded Divine. And by the way, as we keep going here, feel free to drop your most underrated picks down in the comments and hit that like button. Then we have Sikth. Sometimes a particular style taking off has everything to do with right time and right place, and unfortunately this UK band were about a decade too early to that mathy progressive take on djent that Periphery would largely popularize in the 2010s.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet.
That said, their influence on those bands is clear, and Mikey even provided guest vocals on Periphery 5's Reptile. And far from the bloated and somewhat stale state of the genre at large these days, Sikth have a much more unique and often downright experimental approach that helped them stand out. For one, their dual vocalist approach also makes for some very interesting dynamics. And then compositionally, these guys are all over the place with some of the most impressive performances in the genre. They only have 3 full lengths at this point, but also several great EPs. My gateway recommendation is always 2006's Death of a Dead Day. Turning things around again, we have Krallice. Back to the more extreme realms of music, this New York black metal band was another one that was highly requested from your comments. And speaking of impressive performances, this band features arguably some of the most technically proficient musicians in this genre, including Colin Marston of Behold the Arctopus, Dysrhythmia, and freaking Gorguts. It's to the point that I've actually frequently referred to Krallice as the black metal Gorguts in all of their chaotic, frenetic instrumentation and soul-swallowing atmosphere. I didn't even realize until putting this video together that the band have an impressive 11 albums under their belt at this point, dating back to 2008. I'd argue that alongside Imperial Triumphant, they become one of the darlings of the underground scene at this point, but no doubt they are worthy of at least the same tier as Deathspell Omega. Next up is Zao. As I've mentioned in several videos at this point, as a longtime metalcore listener, Zao were one of the foundational bands in the genre in the mid-90s, with their debut All Else Failed dropping the same year as At the Gates' Slaughter of the Soul, and alongside other metalcore classics like Earth Crisis Destroy the Machines, Dead Guy's Fixation on a Coworker, and Converge's Halo in a Haystack. And yet, despite consistently dropping albums for years after that, they never achieved the same status and popularity as groups like Converge, Poison the Well, or Killswitch Engage. Albums like Liberate Te Ex Inferius and The Funeral of God are certainly held up as seminal works within the genre by connoisseurs like myself, but when it comes to mainstream listeners, many won't even recognize the name. And what makes it even more of a crime is that 12 albums deep, they are still dropping some of their best material to date in 2016's The Well-Intentioned Virus, and especially the deeply profound and label-transcending The Crimson Corridor, which ended up making my best albums of 2021 video. Another commonly requested band here, we have Carbomb. So on that same note of taking a common sound to exciting new places, it's no wonder that Carbomb was also a popular choice in the comments. Their 2007 album Centralia was a huge inspiration for the mathcore scene, with Greg Kubaki's approach to guitar a very unique fusion of Meshuggah S. Chugs, Tom Morello goes sci-fi experimentation, and shoegaze-inspired melodies. And despite the overall intensity of their sound, Greg told me on the podcast that his biggest inspiration is actually My Bloody Valentine. But really every member of this band is incredibly talented, even attracting the attention of Gojira's Joseph Duplantier, who has landed guest vocals on multiple albums. My personal favorite is Meta if you want something on the heavier side, but 2019's Mordial is perhaps the best representation of the full scope of their sound and often surprising twists and turns it can take. And then we have Moore's Principium Est. Regular viewers should be completely unsurprised at this pick. I can't tell you how many times I've shouted this Finnish melodeath band's name from the rooftops, and despite coverage on plenty of larger sites over the years, I can't for the life of me understand why they aren't as big as their peers like Insomnium and Children of Bodom. They have an incredibly consistent discography, starting with Inhumanity in 2003, followed by the incredible 1-2 punch of The Unborn and Liberation Equals Termination. The hooks, symphonic elements, and incredibly catchy songwriting on those alone would be enough, but they continued on with banger after banger, with 2027 becoming yet another personal favorite of mine so many years later.
Our time is now to raise our banners, where reclaim all we lost.
Everything people love about the more popular bands in this genre is on display here, and then some, and every time I recommend them, I see comments along the lines of, "Dude, thank you, I can't believe I've never heard of these guys before." Yeah, I can't believe it either, it makes no sense to me at all. But once more, let me know what other bands you think are underrated in the comments, and check out this playlist for my most overrated metal albums of all time. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.